Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today's episode we're taking you to the Minuteman missile silo in South Dakota. This is a fantastic preservation of our history with the Cold War and the arms race. Now if you're planning to visit, one thing to keep in mind is it's not very easy to get in. They have 3 different facilities that you can visit. The first facility is a visitor center. The second facility is a launch control center. And the final is a launch missile facility where the actual silo with the missile is. The visitor center is definitely worth a stop if you're traveling along I-90 and you only have, say, 20 to 30 minutes for a quick stop. I would definitely stop here and at least see the visitor center. It's really well done, has tons of information, and is a great history lesson for anyone that might not be familiar with the Cold War, or even for those that are. There's some incredible memorabilia and things to see and learn. Tours are limited to 6 people at a time. We were told that if we didn't have reservations to not even attempt it because they're in such high demand. So that was our plan. We were leaving Badlands. We stopped at the visitor center and we had no plans to see anything other than the visitor center. But you always want to ask just in case. So as we walked in, I asked the ranger at the counter if they happened to have any tickets available. He said we had just gotten lucky that someone had turned in 4 reservations and they thought they were going to be able to make the tour. Turns out they can't. So we walked into a cancellation situation and were lucky enough to get the tickets. The ranger said that on a typical day, you probably want to be there at like 6 a.m. before they open the doors to be able to get a reservation if it's that day. They take reservations online up to 90 days ahead. At this point, we had been on our trip for about 6 weeks. There's always a balance there when you're headed home. You know, we sort of get into the mode that if you've ever been on a horse and he knows that the trail ride is over, and they know that the oats are waiting for them back at the barn, they'll sort of kick it in high gear and head back to the barn. And we feel similar after being out on the road for many weeks at a time. So there's a balance in not passing up opportunities that, you know, who knows when we're going to be back in South Dakota. I am so glad that we fought that urge this time. It was very educational, not just for us, but for the boys. The boys are in middle school. They're learning about some of these things in their history classes, and there's nothing like seeing history firsthand. So the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty was signed back in 1991, and just 8 years later, they set up this National Historic Monument. I think it's, can't remember. I get a little confused between the monuments and the, anyway, they set this place up for visitors in 1999. It's been preserved almost exactly like it was when it was in operation, and you get a real sense for what it might have felt like to have worked in a place like this. To get to the control facility, you have to drive a few exits down along I-90. You take the exit and you drive back on a gravel road through the prairie land, and it feels like you're going back into nothing. We had our trailer with us, and for those of you that are pulling a trailer, you can turn around back there, but it is limited as to how you do it. If I had a rig any larger than ours, I would probably not want to go back there. There's no parking, so we ended up parked along the side of the road as much as we could out of the way. I think there's private property behind the facility, so there's a farmer that lives back there, and from time to time he comes through with equipment and trucks and whatnot. So you need to be a little bit careful if you're going back there with a larger rig. If you have the option, if you're pulling a toad with a motorhome, I would suggest go ahead and leave the motorhome at the visitor center and take your tow vehicle over to the other facilities. There is a chain link fence around the entire controls facility, and it remains locked all the time. So in order to get to your tour, you wait outside of the locked gate until the ranger comes out to bring you on your tour. Now, our tour guide made the trip for us. I can no longer remember his name. I apologize. but he was originally stationed at the facility when it was in operation. I think he said he did roughly 15 years or so working at the facility, and in retirement he was asked if he would like to be a tour guide for the national park system. And fortunately for all of us, he loved the idea of doing that. He's able to give phenomenal insight as to what it was like to live and work there. Now, on ground level, there's a building that houses the living quarters, the kitchen, the recreational areas. And that was quite interesting. It reminded me a lot of dormitory situations in college. When it was in operation, it was also heavily guarded. There were armed men. The actual launch facility, the place where the control room is located about 30 feet below ground. You can take an elevator down. In fact, you have to take the elevator down, but they won't bring anyone down that's not capable of climbing up the 2 flights of stairs or ladder that it would be necessary to climb in the event that the elevator didn't operate. So when you go down the elevator and you come out, the first thing you see is the entry door to the control room. And as I discussed with the tour guide, there's a very interesting balance between the gravity of the situation and the gravity of your job, and balancing it with a little bit of humor, I think. On this thick glass door to the control room itself, they had this painting like Domino's Pizza that says delivery guaranteed in 30 minutes or less. So emotionally, you get a little bit torn, because I'm thinking of the people that were working there and mentally how they had to prepare themselves for their job. And I'm sure there had to be a real struggle to keep your sanity when you were in this position. One of the questions I asked was about the age of the people that were actually in the control room. Usually it was very young people that were in that position, sort of in the hot seat itself. Part of the reasoning that most people in that position were so young in age was that as we get older, we tend to change our perspective on the gravity of a situation, and someone that was a bit older may not be able to actually accomplish the job. So although the job had the fate of the world in its hands, there was an element of being young and careless that was necessary.
Well, through the entire process, they keep monitoring us to the entire, our career in this business. And so there are some folks that actually come into this business and say, I can't do it. I can't kill 1 million people. And then okay, fine.
I would think it would be typical of someone through their career at some point to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. Actually, most of the time, at that point in your career, you're not sitting behind the chair anymore. You're a commander. You have people underneath you who are responsible for that, but you're responsible to them, or for them, I should say. And so that's the whole process there. Like myself, when I first started out, I had people senior to me basically training me, making sure I was doing the job right and everything else. And then, as I started making rank, I was doing the same thing.
So that's it for our stay at the Minuteman missile silo. We didn't have a whole lot of footage from there. In some ways, it felt a little inappropriate to have a camera out. It's an emotional experience that certainly is going to be carried with us for a long time in our thoughts. And it'll definitely cause you to look at our global position as a country in a different way.
Be kind to the wilderness.
Be kind to the wilderness.
And most importantly,
keep
my bedroom clean.
Come on, guys.
They're stubborn.
Very stubborn.
There you go.
Thank you.
So we're nearing the end of our 2016 Northwest trip. In our next video, you'll be seeing the Herbert Hoover National Library. We'll make a quick stop at the Corn Palace, and we go to the Creation Museum in Cincinnati. If you're enjoying our videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. There's also a little bell you can be notified when we upload new episodes, and we'll see you next time.